So in the last lecture, you learned how to define an input property. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to give this input property an alias or a nickname. Here is a use case. In this component, we have defined our isFavorite field using camel casing notation, because that's what we use in JavaScript or in TypeScript. So the first letter of the first word is lowercase, and the first letter of every word after is uppercase. Now, maybe in your applications, you don't want to use camel casing notation in your HTML markup. So back in our app component, let's say in our property binding, we want to use something like this, is-favorite. Now, in JavaScript or in TypeScript, we cannot have a field with that name. That's not an acceptable identifier. So the solution is to use an alias or a nickname for an input property. So back in our favorite component, here when using the input decorator, we can optionally supply a string to set an alias for this property. So I'm going to use is-favorite. As simple as that. Now back in the browser, our favorite component is initially filled, and when we click it, it toggles. Beautiful. Now using an alias also has another benefit. It keeps the contract of this API stable. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to remove this. Let's go back to our app component and revert this back to isFavorite like this. Okay. Now, back in the component, let's say tomorrow, for refactoring reasons, we decide to change the name of this field. So we press F2 and change this to isSelected. Now you can see all the occurrences are updated here in onClick. Okay. But our application is now broken, because app component is expecting an input property called isFavorite. So when we go to the browser, we see the same error, can't bind to isFavorite. Now to minimize the impact of these changes, we can use an alias to keep the contract of a component stable. So back in our favorite component, I can apply an alias here, isFavorite. Okay. Now this magic string is going to stay here. If I rename this field in the future, our magic string is not going to be impacted. So app component will continue to use this component exactly like before. Let's try it. So we don't have any errors in the browser. And here's our favorite icon. But note that it's initially empty, whereas we expect it to be full. Why? Let's go to the template for our favorite component. So favorite.component.html. Note that here we're still using the isFavorite field. So we renamed this field to isSelected, but we forgot to come back here and make this change. So if I quickly rename this field here to isSelected, now our component is working. What I want to point out here is that yes, when you rename fields, your templates are not updated. So you need to manually make these changes. However, because we use an alias on this input property, we don't have to go and change another 100 places in our code where we have used this component, like in our app component. Also, if you're building a reusable component that we want to distribute, we don't want to tell all our clients, all the consumers of our components that, hey, now this field is renamed from isFavorite to isSelected. So we are minimizing the impact of these changes. We can use rename refactoring in VS Code. So by pressing F2, we can change this field and all the occurrences in our TypeScript code, but then we have to manually go and change the template as well, which is one extra step. Okay? So here's the lesson. If you're building reusable components, give your input properties an alias to keep the contract of your components stable. Next, we're going to look at output properties.